Hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here with me on this Sunday. Um, Brings me great joy to be with you today. um, I monitor my news feeds from various categories that I collect. Um, one of the big joys of my life is always being in school, always poking the universe for the latest stuff, the latest crazy discoveries and information about how it all works and how the body works and how the brain works, and astrophysics and quantum physics and sort of new discoveries in neuroscience and health. And um, it's an endless source of amazing fascination to me. And someplace in there, in the sort of the combination of the research through the esoteric sciences and the quantum physics and astrophysics and all the rest of that all kind of mixed together, what sort of emerges is that um, the universe is uh, impenetrable ultimately, that the secrets that the universe has to offer go forever and never stop. They go forever larger and they go forever smaller and they go forever sideways. Whatever you think is all about, like for instance, science and the Big Bang. The science has now been convinced that the Big Bang, for 70 years, have been convinced that the Big Bang was the whole thing. Now, many of us weirdos out here question that because I personally don't buy the idea of a finite universe. That at the very least, the Big Bang would be an oscillation of endless Big Bangs riding on the wave of a massive universal large sound wave that's a sine wave that is reaching its peak and coming to its bottom and having a Big Bang, like a sonoluminescence or something. Whatever the case may be, I mean, science has been upended since the James Webb Telescope looked further back into time than we've ever been able to see before. Barely 300,000 years after the Big Bang, where things should be still primordial before enough time had passed for the first galaxies to form, which takes billions of years, and this is just 300,000. And what do they see? They see fully mature galaxies that are billions of years old, that are larger than normal, which is the kind of phase you see towards where we are now, rather than at the beginning. And so now all of a sudden everything has to be thrown out because whatever you thought it was all about, you're wrong. You're substantially wrong. And everybody's got to start from scratch again. So I'm constantly sort of cognizant that all the fancy schmancy ideas that I come across and that I communicate to you, and the things that I start to deeply believe myself about what it's all about, there's some part of me that's always sitting on a high chair back over here going, make sure you don't buy into this whole thing 100% because, you've been proven wrong over and over. And so is everybody. It's like, the only truths that I've seen that have actually stood the test of time are the most ancient texts that I've studied from India and from China and from the Middle East, particularly India and China, the oldest texts on the planet. the Sutras of Patanjali and the Upanishads and the Maraptaba, these texts that go back 4,000 years, and the I Ching from China that goes back 5,000 years. And it was already, the ideas of the I Ching were there already for thousands of years before somebody finally wrote something down. Same thing with India. These were oral traditions and stories passed down from grandfather to grandson and grandmother to granddaughter over millennia before writing started. I saw an article that showed, human beings have been around, for hundreds of thousands of years, and it's only been in the last 5,000 years that a written history has started to be made. It means that, 98% of all of human history is lost. The story is lost. We can only conjecture by studying bones that we dig up in the ground. And how fraught with possibilities of mistake that is, in the future, 10,000 years from now, they'll dig up the remnants of our civilization. They'll find some bathroom with a toilet. They'll think it's some kind of a holy water urn that people used to, sprinkle themselves with in some kind of prayer. It's sort of chutzpah madness, There's a T-shirt. That all being said, the title today about the fabric of space-time is based on one of the newest ideas that's popped through my news feed from two of my sort of favorite scientists, and Neil deGrasse Tyson and this other guy, Brian Greene. So if you haven't followed either one of them, Neil deGrasse Tyson everybody sort of knows about, but Brian Greene is not as up there in the limelight, although he is. It's Brian Greene with Greene. So check him out. His stuff is cool. But there was a conversation between the two of them that only lasted a few minutes. It just blew the top of my head off. I mean, a whole brand new idea about how all of this works. That immediately I had. That's what this part of today's talk is all about. Is what they were pinpointing and the ramifications of where that goes, which is sort of deeply down the rabbit hole. And that you're in trouble when I bring my masks out and have to put the mask on. This is the cosmic Joker mask that whatever you thought it's all about, oh God, were you ever wrong? So that being said, we make our initial excursion down the rabbit hole today as we begin to talk about what Brian Greene had come up with as a new sort of mind-blowing idea, and a conversation that he had with Neil deGrasse Tyson. If string theory is right, the microscopic fabric of our universe is a richly intertwined, multi-dimensional labyrinth within which the strings of the universe endlessly twist and vibrate, rhythmically beating out the laws of the cosmos. See why I like this guy? I mean, he talks like me. It's like there's certain kind of a scientific poetry kind of thing in that sentence. It's like just... I love this guy. Anyway, yeah, that's, we talked about the string theory thing, that at the smallest of the small, there are curled up strings of energy that are in a state of vibration. And as they change the tuning of their vibration, they form different particles which make up everything. So everything is made of particles. Particles are made of strings vibrating, and at the core of everything is vibrating, something vibrating at different frequencies and different tones. And as they combine together, the music of the universe is born. So today we talk about the fabric of space-time, and essentially the fabric of the whole universe and everything in it, and how it's all put together from a pretty simple concept. But the vastness of everything, as far as big as you can stretch your mind, and as small as you can compress your mind into the smallest of the small Planck length of the quantum field. All of these things, from the largest that you can imagine to the smallest that you can imagine, are all governed by the same laws reflected in large and small as fractal holographic repetitions of central laws that we see operating everywhere, and including halfway between the infinitely large and the infinitely small, which is you and me, are the distillation of universal law made manifest in this body as well. So whenever you see new discoveries about the nature of reality, just remember that you are reality, and all of it is talking about you and your experience. And inside your brain, inside your consciousness, the rules that we see governing these massive structures in the universe are the same rules that is governing me and my next thought. Wormholes, entangled particles, and the fabric of space-time. So the fabric of space-time, this is sort of thing that that Brian Greene was sort of bringing up, that when you look at the infinite sort of tapestry that's woven of the universe, where you have sort of nothing, and we find out that nothing is not nothing, nothing is filled with something, and that's essentially what nothing looks like. It's filled with titanic energies that are boiling at the smallest of the quantum field, and boiling as quantum foam, right? We talked about that before. I had a whole thing on that. Empty space is a boiling, bubbling brew of virtual particles that pop in and out of existence in a time scale so short that you can't even measure them. The frame rate of this movie is beyond penetration by our mind, because the frame rate of how neurons turn on and off to gather information, the frame rate is way, 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 way by trillions of times faster than what we can perceive, or what we can measure with the most delicate instruments that we can so far devise. So you can't see through the illusion of the hyperdimensional movie that we're stuck in the middle of, that all of this seems so real because the frame rate is fast. And if you zoom in with the magnifying glass to see if you can see the pixels that make the movie, like the pixels on your computer screen, if you took a magnifying glass and you held it up, hang on a second. You know me, I happen to have a magnifying glass. So you take a magnifying glass and you hold it up to your screen, and you look closer and closer so you can see the little pixels on the screen, little colored pixels moving around. That gives you the illusion that you're seeing me here on this screen. No matter how big the magnifying glass, you can't see that in the quantum field. The pixel depth is trillions of times more dense than the highest magnification that you could ever come up with, right? So the universe has devised this sort of movie illusion that we're in a way that it can't be penetrated with external perceptions. It can only be penetrated by my imagination inside my consciousness, where I can connect with it directly in the present moment, where all of this is outside of time. So frame rate no longer has a reference point because I'm faster than that. Frame rate takes time. In the present moment is outside of time. So consciousness is the only place where we can go, where we can penetrate through the illusion by essentially reaching a place deep in ourselves before the first flicker takes place. Now is the only place where you can penetrate through. But at the deepest of the deep, where we have this quantum foam, this boiling nexus of particles, virtual particles that pop in and out of existence in a highly energized, super powerful form that we always thought was empty space, the vacuum. We always thought this was the vacuum, but now we know that there is no such thing as a vacuum. Everything is filled with something, that all of it's filled, and it's filled with energy. And that energy is forming patterns. What might appear to be chaos, chaotic motion in the quantum foam field, highly energized virtual particles popping in and out of existence into other dimensions and out of those dimensions into ours. All of that is still minuscule compared to what probably is there if we could crack that open. But this concept of black holes and ultimate supergravity and quantum foam and energized states that are super, super powerful at this quantum foam zone state, which looks very much like the illustrations that we see of the multiverse, where each one of these bubbles in the quantum foam is a whole universe of its own on a completely different time scale. So we might look at this quantum foam where all of these bubbles are popping in and out of existence so fast that you can't measure them. But if you could play the universal film back at slow motion enough so that you would suspend these, expanding and blowing up and then being replaced by another one, and take a look and zoom into this, you would see an entire universe there that for the inhabitants inside that universe, this would be lasting for billions and billions of years. It's all a relative time scale to the people populating that universe. From us out here, it's like unimaginably fast, but we're on a different time scale. So we are, if we could drop down into this quantum foam realm, we would see unimaginable levels of activity going on here. But as we got smaller and smaller and smaller to be the size of this, time scale would begin to synchronize up with our time scale, and all of this would become slow-mo. The infinite quantum field of particles popping in and out of existence, according to Brian Greene, are connected by black holes that connect themselves together with other black holes and form these sort of tubular structures where one part of space connects with another space in what everybody calls a wormhole. Now, let's refresh ourselves that the fabric of space-time at the deepest, smallest quantum level that we can identify, at the quantum foam level, where things are popping in and out of existence, virtual particles popping in and out of existence. As soon as these particles appear, whatever other particles are there at the same time, they all get entangled with each other. So when they pop out of this plane of existence to wherever it is they go, they're connected to each other now through micro-miniaturized wormholes. That means that the universe is populated with a densely packed infinite number of wormholes that are connecting virtual particles from our dimension and other dimensions where they pop in and out of existence. And this forms a web of connections that is the fabric that we're talking about, the loom of the universe, weaving the multidimensional tapestry that we see at the largest of the large and the smallest of the small. The warp and the woof of those threads weaving through each other are actually wormholes of virtual particles that are popping in and out of existence, causing the threads of these wormholes to hold the whole business together. How's that? What do you think of that one? So yeah, you can start to understand why I had to put the mask on today, because this is sort of mind-blowing stuff. This fact that these particles, as soon as they're popping in and out of existence, are entangling with other particles and entangled through wormholes that connect them together, that's outside of space-time. That means that the threads that hold space-time together are non-space-time threads. They're other dimensional threads that aren't part of space-time. They're sort of outside of time, because when you go into one wormhole and you come out of another one, you've skipped space and you've skipped time. You're instantly there. You've bypassed time and space. So it's sort of a cosmic poetry that the warp and the woof of the threads that make the hyperdimensional tapestry of everything we know of what space-time is made of non-space-time material. Oh. So in these quantum filaments of these wormholes that are attaching these subquantum particles, these virtual particles that are popping in and out of existence. And remember, all of this is infinitely scalable in size and time signature. So these virtual particles are popping in and out so fast we can't measure them, but from their own time scale, it's taking billions of years for them to arise and populate life in infinite universes within them, until they demise and pop into another dimension. An infinite number of wormholes that are connecting back and forth through different dimensions, weaving the threads of connectivity of wormholes and virtual particles that form the warp and the woof of the tapestry of the infinitely small and the infinitely large. Well, actually, this picture here, I had ChatGPT draw this for me. You know, I put in, make me a picture of the infinite tapestry of space-time formed by virtual particle wormholes connecting everything together. I thought, you know, I thought the AI might just blow a fuse trying to draw that one, but sure enough, here we go. So here's another one that it drew for me. At the center of all of this craziness and insanity of the fabric of space-time and wormholes and virtual particles and quantum foam and all the rest, at the core, in the center of all of that, is my consciousness. And what I mean by my consciousness is the universal consciousness that is also me at my deepest core part, that is manufacturing all of this, because all of this, according to the ancient literature, is nothing more than a dream in the mind of God, so to speak. At the core, where it comes into me, is the proton. And we discussed this in a previous live stream with the Schwarzschild proton, that the proton itself is made up of these same quantum fields, right, that we're just talking about. This fabric of space-time is also in the center of each proton in each atom in my body. Trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of them that make up everything that's me, right? That make up the atoms and all the compounds that make my body. At the center of all of those are atoms, the center of all of those are protons, and at the center of all the protons is this quantum field of virtual particles popping in and out of existence, connected with wormholes into other dimensions in the center of every proton in my body, and the center of every proton in every brain cell in my brain that's trying to comprehend this concept right now, this very second. You know, the this idea that the fabric of space-time, and here we are at the rabbit hole, you know, the fabric of space-time, woven by micro-miniaturized wormholes that connect the virtual particles into pairs that come in and out of existence, like a quantum net that's holding everything together. If you were capable of snipping that net, snipping those wormholes apart from each other, then the fabric of all space-time would fall apart and everything would not be connected anymore, and all of it would disperse out into individual parts and then disappear, right? So that brings me up to this little piece, the one that sort of blew my mind so much, I thought I might share it with everybody. So here we go.
I have not been the same since we had lunch. You explained to me, and I've said it here, the fabric of space-time might be woven by wormholes that connect the virtual particle pairs that come in and out of existence.
So it's like a little quantum net holding the whole universe together.
Exactly right. We find mathematically, if we cut the threads of quantum entanglement, space falls apart. It discretizes into little tiny pieces and then just disappears.
I gotta go. I gotta go.
So you see what I'm talking about. Um, so just to remember that that's mind-blowing enough on its own. But when we start to peer down the rabbit hole of the implications of what that means, we're now into our own consciousness and in our own individual brain cells, that the structure of those brain cells is part of this virtual quantum foam wormhole tapestry that forms everything in my own internalized consciousness environment, with brain waves and states of consciousness and all the rest. The interior of protons exhibit maximum quantum entanglement. The interior of protons exhibit maximum quantum entanglement, may share common physics with black holes, protons, in every atom of your body, in every atom that makes up the neurons in your brain, which are firing at this moment trying to conceive of the concepts that we're talking about, is the active expression of these crazy ideas. The fact that there are not only black holes in the center of each proton of every atom in your body, but there are wormholes that are connecting virtual particles at the quantum foam level, of every neuron, of every atom, of the parts of your brain that are associated with states of consciousness. Fragments of the interior of a proton have been shown by scientists from Mexico and Poland to exhibit maximum quantum entanglement. This discovery, already confronted with experimental data, allows us to suppose that in some respects, the physics of the inside of a proton may have much in common, not only with well-known thermodynamic phenomena, but even with the physics of black holes. And the physics of black holes is a necessary component before you can extrapolate the math that forms wormholes inside the protons of every atom in your body. So, where black holes on either side connect with this wormhole, and the connection on each side are virtual particles, and this connection right here is the thread that's weaving the multidimensional tapestry of space-time and weaving it miniature inside of every proton in your brain, in your body. Consciousness itself is deeply associated with this process, that the threads are threads of consciousness. Fling me across the fabric of time and the seas of space, make me nothing, and from nothing, everything. Rumi. If you don't know who Rumi is, look him up. Quantum physics reveals the unity of the universe. And this is April 19th, 2024. This is recent. What are they talking about? They're talking about this quantum weaving of wormholes and black holes and entanglement and the whole business we've just discussed. That ultimately all of it applies to me in my body, with my consciousness, experiencing my life in the reality that we're all part of, because I'm not separate from that. When we talk about all of these fantastical properties of how the universe is woven together, We are the universe. We are part of the universe. We're grown out of it. So all of it applies to me directly. And the part of me that centers my consciousness and arises the ability to understand all of this stuff. Every neuron, the billions of neurons with the trillions of connections between neurons, inside all the atoms that make those neurons is this process we're talking about. And consciousness in the middle of the center of all of that. New studies suggest that the human brain has a fractal architecture and is poised at a critical state between two phases. Now, we actually talked about this before. The critical two phases, and it's not just the brain, are colloidal water. In other words, the body is 70% water, but it's not just water. It's sort of biological water, sort of a colloidal water, intracellular, extracellular fluids, blood plasma and cerebrospinal fluid and lymphatic fluids, and all the fluids that are in my body, 70% of that, all of those are a special type of fluid that balances on the razor edge of a colloidal fluid on one hand and a liquid crystal on the other hand. And a liquid crystals have a unique property in the universe. Crystalline structures have a lattice work that can hold memory, like water, or like a crystal, a quartz crystal, like this guy, right? The lattice work, atomic structure of this crystal can hold memory, because the lattice work of the crystal will bend and deform and hold that shape. So the body uses that same principle. And the only place where you find these actual crystals like this is inside the pineal gland. Physical, solid crystals like this that operate on the same principle of holding memory. And when they're distorted and torqued or pushed on, and you put pressure on them, they generate electrical sparks. And that's the piezoelectric effect, which works throughout the whole body. So the body is filled with microtubules, and the microtubules are made of a crystalline structure that exhibits piezoelectric properties. So that means that all of my body processes are designed to generate electrical pulses under pressure. And in the universe, what creates pressure? Sound waves is what creates pressure. Sound is pure energy moving through a medium at a certain frequency with a pressure wave that puts pressure on things. So many of the processes in the body, and I did a whole live stream about how the electrical discharges of the neurons themselves are actually a sound pressure wave moving through the axon that is shifting the fluids that the axon is made of, and all the microtubules that run through are being depolarized with pressure, activating a piezoelectric spark, and the sparks are sparking at the leading edge of the pressure wave as it moves down the axon. So all the electrical activity that we're measuring in EEG are not electrical discharges coming straight from the neuron. They're electrical discharges coming from the piezoelectric discharges of the deformation of the microtubules and the colloidal water balancing on the edge of a liquid crystal that gets pushed there with pressure, and the pressure is sound waves moving along through the axons, from the neurons, from the origin in the center of the brain called the thalamus. I won't go further than that here because I did a whole live stream on But this fractal architecture, I've talked about this so many times, that the brain exhibits the same kind of fractal architecture that we see in the grand design of the universe, and how galaxies are strung together with sort of the connectome of universal scales in miniature in the connectome of the brain. Look at this one, February 2024. Universal pattern of brainwave frequencies is unraveled. This particular article, which I also mentioned this kind of discovery before, the brain can store nearly 10 times more data than previously thought. Scientists harnessed a new method to precisely measure the amount of information the brain can store, and it could help advance our understanding of learning. And that's actually on a couple of fronts. One front is the fact that there are 6 layers of brain cells. Now, I learned this in school 50 years ago. We've known about this for a long time, but it's only been recently that discharges from these neurons, these 6 layers of neurons, form different brainwave frequencies, and they're stratified. The high brain frequencies at gamma and hypergamma and lambda come from the upper layers, and as you go down by layers, you end up in high ranges of beta, and finally into alpha and theta and delta and epsilon and all the rest. It's sort of layered the same way we see brainwaves, that hyper-focused states up here and deep subconscious connection with consciousness down here. But it means that there are 6 times more levels of neuron brain activity than we thought before, right? The gray matter on the outside, we thought that was just the neurons that was doing it. Now we realize that there are 6 layers of those all doing that. And they're all communicating with each other in various ways, where one brain frequency is modulating another frequency. Now, on the exosphere, we already know that to be true, that gamma modulates theta and lifts all the information out of the brain in a wireless network of binding all my 5 sense information together. So reality out here looks normal. A first of its kind signal was detected in human brains. Now, this kind of a signal is part of this idea how the brain is 10 times more powerful than we ever thought it was, because when the ions run down the axons and reach the end plate, where it's going to create a chemical messenger that goes across a gap to the other axon and either continues the signal on or not. The architecture of the brain and how many of those connections are there is trillions of connections. So you can kind of do the math and figure out how much information the brain can process. Now, all of a sudden, with the 6 layers of the brain cells, we have to multiply all that by 6. Now we realize that the exchange of ions across are dependent on a sodium ion. So a sodium ion is important in transmitting the chemical messenger across to the next axon. Now we find out that the brain uses twice as many as that. It uses calcium ion as well as sodium ion. So now all of a sudden, it's twice as complex, right? So now the 6 layers of brain cells, each of those now is doubled. So instead of 10 times more, it's actually more like 12 times more brain power going on than we ever thought before. And the communication of brain waves between these different layers is something they're just starting to poke a stick at. Our brain matter is stuck at a phase transition. And this phase transition is what I was talking about with the colloidal fluids and the liquid crystal state. The brain is in a perfectly balanced state that keeps it from transitioning to a gas or a liquid, says a new research. It's this delicate balanced state that is required for quantum consciousness to activate and connect with the universe as a whole. It's why the brain is so surprisingly gelatinous. When I did human dissection, we dissected the human brain, and I held that brain in my hand. It did not feel like this rubber brain, which is pretty solid. It's slightly squeezable, but the real brain is like a bowl of stiff jello. It's remarkably squishy and gelatinous in a way that kind of sort of blows your mind. Now we're beginning to understand why. It requires itself to be in this quasi state that's not quite solid and not quite liquid. And that's the required state it has to be in to be right on the razor's edge between a colloidal fluid and a liquid crystal. So many of these things have become much more clear as time has gone on. Consciousness and liquid crystals. Consciousness is probably related to the liquid crystalline physical state of animal brains. In this scheme of things, consciousness is an emergent property of the liquid crystal, which needs to be no more mysterious than the wateriness of water or the color associated with the wavelength. Now, I think that they have an incorrect conclusion there, because they're still of the mind that consciousness arises out of physical processes, and I don't agree with that, and neither does the most ancient texts on the planet, and neither do many of the scientists in the world. That consciousness is not an emergent property out of physical processes, but physical processes are an emergent property of consciousness itself in the infinite field. That this comes from consciousness and not the other way around. But the process is so intimately intertwined in a yin-yang that it's a chicken or an egg thing. That, but from the ancient texts, consciousness is first. And this manifestation comes from consciousness. Quantum physics tends to agree with that. The human brain's complexity verges on the brink of chaos, but it's held in check right on that balanced razor edge borderline. The human brain is said to be the most complex object in the known universe. 89 billion neurons, each have 7,000 connections on average. And the physical structure of all those entities may be balanced precariously on the knife's edge, according to a new study. The knife's edge is colloidal fluid and the liquid crystal state, which generates the piezoelectric effect. The magnificent, mind-blowing brain that's inside your skull right now. Thinking thoughts, watching me talk, trying to conceptualize those ideas, thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, hearing something outside and processing that, fiddling around with your toes. I mean, all of it happening at the same time. And with plenty of room to spare to do other kind of calculations. It's so unimaginably mind-blowing that this idea that the whole universe is woven together with black holes and wormholes and virtual particles and quantum foam, from the largest of the large that you could ever see and the smallest of the small inside every proton of every atom in your body. And at the center of all of that swirling around is consciousness itself in sort of a high-level meditation state just manifesting and spinning it all out effortlessly. And then another part of that creation, attempting to understand it all of it, that is being created by your own deepest level of consciousness itself. It's sort of a trick of the hand. It's a magician's trick, where one hand doesn't get to see what the other hand is doing. One hand is creating it all, including me, and the other hand is a big mystery I'm trying to figure out. And as grand as it all gets, into an infinite number of parallel universes in all kinds of different dimensions, and it just explodes your mind to try to conceptualize what real infinity looks like, you know. Every story that could ever be told in every dimension and every time scale and every size scale to infinity that has always been going on and will always go on forever. And one of those stories is my story that has led me to this computer screen to look at this crazy picture right now. In the center of it all is my inmost consciousness that creates everything. And in that means that I have the power to change the creation that I'm living and change my reality, orchestrate my reality to align more with the growth of my soul, that I begin to dispense with the things that no longer serve me. I get to fire people out of my space and then hire the people who are going to be in my space, that I get to search for who gets to be here with me, that I no longer have time or the inclination to be entertaining people that suck energy from me and don't give me anything. I'm looking for people who have an even flow that's synchronized and symbiotic, that we all depend on one another for friendship and the spark of fun and exploration. We all depend on each other to make our lives work. The deeper we get into that connection, the more our life works effortlessly and things come all by themselves. As you start to walk on the way appears. Rumi again. And Rumi again. What you seek is seeking you. What you seek is seeking you. It's the big curly Q. It's the big yin yang, where who's seeking and who's being sought are the same thing. They're each seeking each other. They're swirling around. It's why we are all here, why we're interested in all of this kind of information, to try to crack the part of me that stands in the way, crack that open that door, step across that threshold, be here now, synchronize with the blinding sort of glory of being alive in the moment, with all the stuff that's in the universe, that's provided from the universe itself. Living life forms all around me, other human beings, other people, who I love and who loves me back. To me, that's what it's all about. And to experience it in its fullest possible way, with no artifacts in the way. And that indeed is why we're here, attempting to connect ourselves together through these crazy soundtracks that entrain everybody to the same place. So there's power in numbers to open that place among us and carry that forward into our regular lives, where We've changed, and something is exuding from us that is changing those people around us. Our life begins to shift, and our world begins to shift. So, here we go. Thank you all very much for being here with me today. Have a happy and a joyous week. I'm going to leave the chat open for a little while, and then we'll move all of it over to Discord if there's still conversations that need to go on. Thank you all very much. My pleasure and my joy and my honor to be here with you. Thank you all, and I'll see you next week.